So I was going to start this off by telling you my name is Paul Revere, and I'm here to tell you the British are coming. That was a joke. That was a bad joke. My name is Greg Hoffmeister, and I'm one of the co-organizers of Mass Adoption. And it's not too late to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and welcome to 2023. There's a lot of new faces here, and I want to welcome all the newcomers to Mass Adoption. We sincerely appreciate the effort that you made to be here, and we're glad you're here. Mass Adoption is a Bitcoin-focused meetup that started back in May of 2022, and tonight is our 9th consecutive month. So if you're into block height time, and you like to do math, like Mr. Foss over here, that means we're averaging a Bitcoin meetup approximately every 3,850 blocks. Tick-tock, next block. Our mission is to help spread awareness of Bitcoin and educate those interested in learning more about this civilization-altering discovery. All I can say is what a time to be alive. We like to focus on Bitcoin with a big B, the decentralized global monetary network that allows you to send value across space and time, instantly, peer-to-peer, without having to rely on a third-party intermediary. I just did it tonight with a few shirt purchases and transactions, so it works. And Bitcoin little b, a digitally scarce and finite bearer instrument that cannot be debased. You see, the bottom line is that we need a form of money that cannot be co-opted by the government. We need to separate money from state to protect our inalienable rights to enjoy liberty, pursue happiness, and acquire and possess property. Bitcoin fixes this, and if you know, you know. A couple thank yous and shout outs before I introduce tonight's guest speaker. First, I want to thank our generous food and beverage sponsor, River Financial. River is a Bitcoin-only financial services company built on a Bitcoin standard. River is the best place to buy and withdraw Bitcoin. There's nothing better than taking custody of your own keys. But if you have to leave your Bitcoin in secure hands for any period of time, River has a secure and proprietary Bitcoin custody solution that is second to none. River also provides Bitcoin mining products that allow clients to purchase, deploy, and start mining Bitcoin with a few clicks of your iPhone. No kidding, I do it, it's incredible. I have firsthand experience with River mining, and it's a great feeling to be mining fractions of a Bitcoin on a daily basis, and knowing that I'm doing my part to help secure the overall Bitcoin network. And finally, River is a pioneer in the utilization and deployment of the second layer Lightning Network. And their River Lightning Services, RLS, is leading the way to help proliferate Lightning deposits and withdrawals around the world. Mike from River is here tonight, so if you have any questions, hit him up. He's here. Thank you. Thanks again to River. Okay, shout outs. Shout outs to Connor and Ron, who are members of the Mass Adoption team. And they've been working diligently behind the scenes on the Mass Adoption website. It's a work in progress, but these guys are doing great work. And soon it will be the digital hub for all things mass adoption. So check it out at massadoption.net. I want to give a shout out to Christina from Triad Productions and thank her for helping us capture some great content. And allowing us to share mass adoption with the world. A big shout out to my buddy, Jeff Kassler, co-organizer of Mass Adoption and leader of MS Bitcoin Life. Honestly, his creativity, his strength, his drive, and his entrepreneurial spirit is infectious and inspirational. And we have big plans, including a summer music festival powered by Bitcoin. So, if you're interested in that, and it sounds interesting, and you're interested in helping us with it, please reach out to us because we're going to need all hands on deck on that one. And finally, a shout out to Carol Ann, who's the artist who is always at our meetups, and she brings her unbelievable art, which is Satoshi's white paper in artistic form, and she accepts sats for her artwork. So if you're interested in that, interested in supporting Carol Ann. And finally, shout outs to a couple former mass adoption guest speakers and a pair of Canadians living in our attic, Greg Foss and BJ Dichter. We appreciate what you do for Bitcoin, what you do for freedom, and we appreciate your support of mass adoption. Speaking of guest speakers, let's get to the main event here. Tonight's guest speaker is Jason Lowery. Jason has a degree in mechanical engineering from Baylor University. He spent almost 9 years in the United States Air Force, 2 years as a member of the U.S. Space Force, and has most recently spent the last year and a half at MIT as a National Defense Fellow, researching the national strategic implications of proof-of-work protocols. Before I hand the mic over to Jason, just bear with me for 2 more minutes. One of my favorite articles from the fall edition of Bitcoin Magazine. If you haven't picked this up or found it, you need to. It's packed with amazing content. Honestly, this is the first one that I've actually read. Obviously, I see all their content online and their conferences, but I was blown away how much stuff is in here. It's too much to read. But my favorite article from that edition was by Natalie Smolensky. And the title of that article is, "It is Time to Refound the American Republic." In the article, she quotes the 6th President of the United States, John Quincy Adams, from our great state of Massachusetts, by the way, from a speech he gave while serving as Secretary of State in 1821. Quote, "America's glory is not dominion, but liberty. Her march is the march of the mind. She has a spear and a shield, but the motto on the shield is freedom, independence, and peace," end quote. Natalie goes on to explain the meaning of Adams' poignant words. Quote, "Americans prioritize individual freedom and peaceful self-sovereignty over imperial power, over the projection of power, over the countries and other people." Natalie ends her article with the following summary. Quote, "In order to refound America, we must remember who we are. America and Americans stand for liberty, not dominion. This call for refounding is therefore a calling for us to become better people, and for others whose autonomy and independence we respect to become better as well, on their own terms. Americans will lead by example, not by force. In this way, we can again lift up our own people and transform the world," end quote. So, Mr. Lowery, I submit to you that the U.S. government and the U.S. military, with the largest kinetic footprint in the world, are faced with a difficult task as we all grasp for this new shared vision. How does the largest military in the world embrace freedom and peace? And what are the national strategic implications of a revolutionary proof-of-work protocol like Bitcoin? You've been quoted as saying, "Bitcoin is proof that proof of work is working." And I'm going to let you untwist that tongue twister. Jason Lowery, everybody, over to you.
Hey, so guys and ladies, thanks so much for coming. It's a pleasure for me to come down from Canada, but I want to, I actually hijacked the mic here because I wasn't on the schedule. But here's what I want to say. Firstly, thanks everyone for coming. Secondly, I want to re-emphasize Jeff and Greg Hoffmeister's efforts for BTC mass adoption, or Massachusetts adoption. You guys really have a chance to change the world here because there's some really important schools in the area. There's some very big money managers in this area, This is where a lot of things are set. I said last night at a dinner, it's like the Red Sox against the Yankees, okay? New York is fiat and Boston is Bitcoin, so fucking do it, okay? It's that simple. So here's why it's cool. Let's look around the room, and Greg has his son here and two friends, Needham High football players. And then Jeff has his son here. I mean, this is about the future for the kids. And so I just met a young man, Donovan, in the crowd, and he says that he works for Domino's Pizza. And I think you might have recruited one of your big franchisees to come, because I'm going to tell you that when you invoke Bitcoin payment rails at your restaurants, and I have done this in Canada, you'll see sales increase 20% easily, just because of Bitcoiners who want to spend and promote the Bitcoin ecosystem. So having been to El Salvador, where I have friends who are up here, Sharon Dow, who's a local mass lady who's living in El Salvador full time, this is a pretty big movement, okay? And it happens quickly, but it happens with purpose. And the purpose is for the kids. So here's where I end this. About a year and a half ago, I had the pleasure of having dinner with Jason Lowry and a gentleman by the name of Peter McCormick. I'm not sure if you guys follow him, but he's a friend of mine. So Peter McCormick from England, and myself and Jason, and I was blown away by this young man. Like, honestly, you were, brother. Yeah, good to see you, man. So it's so crazy that life goes full circle. Because I left that meeting and I said, oh my God, I think I might have met the smartest man in the world besides Michael Saylor. And then last night, I listened to him again, and I'm sorry, Michael Saylor, but Jason Lowry is actually fucking smarter than you, okay? So, but that's okay. We're not putting him on under pressure here. This is a young man who is trying to help change the world in a really positive way, okay? Like he'll use terminology that sounds violent, because he talks to people that are taught to talk that way. But don't take his kinetic energy, projections, and things like that as violence. It's actually peaceful. Okay, so final shout out to my buddy BJ Dichter. We sort of fought for Canadian freedom and the Canadian convoy and the truckers, and some of us had our bank accounts frozen. And my wife wasn't very happy about that, but at least at the end of the day, and by the way, my bank account wasn't frozen. Don't tell the authorities, but I think BJ's might have been. Look, Bitcoin fixes so many things. Let's fight for freedom. This is where the freedom of America started. It's very, very appropriate, in my opinion, that this is going full circle. Thanks again, you guys. It's a pleasure to be here. We're fighting for the kids. You guys better win your national championship football. Needham High. Everything, Dartmouth football, let's do it. Thank you, Jason. Give me a hug.
Can you hear me okay? So this is not going to be a talk about Bitcoin. This is going to be a talk about revolutions. I'm wearing the shirt that was given to me by Greg, talking about peaceful revolutions. And so what this talk is going to be about is, why do revolutions happen? How do they start? And how do we win them? So something that I want to start off with is a point that I think a lot of people get a little bit confused about. And it goes with a story. So around 1500, there's this dude named Christopher Columbus, Admiral Columbus at the time. He's on his 4th voyage to the Americas. And he runs into a problem. His ship and I think 3 other ships, basically his little fleet, gets shipwrecked in Jamaica. They had these worms that pretty much ate up the ships. And so by the time they got to the Americas, they got shipwrecked in Jamaica. They had no idea where they were. Their ships were trashed. And so they relied on the help of the local Jamaicans to survive for several months. And they were not kind to their hosts. They stole from them. Reports are that they did more than that, and much worse than that. To the point where the local Jamaicans stopped giving them aid. And Admiral Columbus and his entire crew found themselves in a little bit of a pickle, because they can't farm this land, they can't leave because their ships are gone. And things started getting really bad. It started getting mutinous. Admiral Columbus was afraid for his life. These are all in the journals that you can talk about. They started acting like they were going to kill each other. Well, Admiral Columbus's son was on this voyage, and he just so happened to be an astronomy nerd, and had just read about, or before the voyage, had read about this thing called the lunar eclipse that was going to happen sometime in February, early-ish 1504. And so Admiral Columbus took this information from his son, and he went out to the local Jamaicans who had already forsaken him and just stopped helping getting them aid. And he gathered up the local chiefs and he talked to them. And he said, if you guys don't help me, I'm going to take away your moon. My God's going to be so pissed at your God that we're going to destroy your moon. And to these people, their moon was their God. And sure enough, like clockwork, February 29th, 1504, there's a entry in the journal of Admiral Columbus's son of what happened when the lunar eclipse occurred. And he describes the local Jamaicans flooding the shipwreck, howling, screaming, falling on their knees, praying to the crew, giving them all their resources, promising they'll give them everything they can. And so the point is, you don't need a navy, you don't need an army, you don't need an air force, you don't need a space force to take people's stuff, to conquer a people, to exploit people. You never needed those things. All you need is for people to believe something. You need a belief system that you can exploit. Figure out what people believe in and exploit it. And that's how you take their wealth. That's how you take their resources. That's how you oppress them.
Yep.
So, I say this as the military guy, as the spook, as the guy who's on those deployed downrange.
Oh.
We have to understand that there is merit to physical power projection. There are times where it is necessary, particularly when your belief systems are getting exploited. And if you go back and if you study history, and if you look at every single revolution that has ever happened, if you want to know where the revolution starts, it starts with a common belief system. It starts with people believing something, namely some form of abstract power. And that abstract power is created when people try to convince you that you need your permission for something. So if you can convince people that they need your permission to do something, you have power over them, an abstract version of power. And that's how all these belief systems start. That's how all these people rise to their abstract positions of power over others. They convince them that you need me, you need my permission, you need my forgiveness, you need something from me, and you can't get it from me unless you do this for me, unless you bring me your goods, unless you pay me your tithings, unless yada, 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 okay? And humans are optimistic people. We wish it could be true that we could create a belief system that couldn't be systemically exploited. We wish it were true that someone up in the high positions of rank in these belief systems could be trusted not to exploit their abstract powers. And we believe and we hope that maybe through some form of really well-designed, really well-encoded logic that we can scribble onto parchment or carve into clay tablets or write into Python, we hope that we can encode logic, and then we can create a belief system that can't be systemically exploited. But what we fail over and over again to realize is that no amount of logic can prevent the systemic exploitation of logic. The problem from the very start is that you are vulnerable whenever you adopt a common belief system. And there is nothing you can do. There is no amount of logic that you encode. There's no way you can design that belief system in such a way that it wouldn't be systemically exploited. There's only one way. If you study 10,000 years of agrarian society, of warfare, if you study the last 6,000 years of people trying to write down logic to help prevent their belief systems from being exploited by the people with high rank and high positions of power. There's only one way those revolutions are able to stop that exploitation, are able to stop that oppression. And it ain't through logic, okay? It's not through diplomacy. If you want to stop asking for permission, you have to use something that's permissionless. You have to use something that's zero trust. And as much as we wish it wouldn't be the case, there's only one thing that I know that is zero trust, that is permissionless, and that works every time, and that is the projection of physical power. Physical power is unique. These watts that we're talking about, watts are unique because they're actually not a belief system. That is a physical thing in reality. It doesn't matter if you're sympathetic to power, it's going to work the same way. If we're talking about physical power, okay? It doesn't matter if you're sympathetic to that sword being swung at you or that bullet being shot at you, it's going to work the same whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter how much logic you try to encode into your belief system. Power is systemically exogenous. That means it exists as an ontologically different thing than these abstractions in our brain. And by the way, there has never been a time in human history or in the 4 billion years of life on Earth where animals haven't been using physical power as their basis for settling their intra-species property disputes, for achieving consensus on the legitimate state of ownership and chain of custody of their resources, and for establishing their dominance hierarchy. I challenge anyone to find me an example of a life form that doesn't have to fight for its right to live. They all do, and it is brutal outside. We don't see it often. Most biomass on Earth are domesticated animals. They're the animals that we've systemically exploited for 40,000 years who now serve us. And we look at them and we see our cows and we see our domesticated animals, and they're not nearly as aggressive as what you see in Africa or what you see in the proper wild. There's never been a time where any animal, mammals especially, and humans especially, have not been settling all their disputes over natural resources using physical power at the basis. We just try to convince ourselves through our belief system that there's some other way, and then that way eventually backfires or it becomes dysfunctional, and then that's when the wars break out. That's when the revolutions happen, or if you don't win the revolution, we call it a civil war. And so that's just something I want to make clear right up front. You don't need a military to capture people, to exploit people, to oppress people. In fact, that physical power is the only thing that can help you escape that. And it's not really a matter of when, it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of how long are you willing to put up with people exploiting you and trying every alternative you can to try to encode some logic or try to use diplomacy. How far are you willing to put up with that until a population inevitably fires the first shot? And that's when the revolution starts. And we're 20 miles away. You go northeast, we're 20 miles away from when this belief system did that and from when this nation started. We tried, it didn't work. Never works. Never in the history of human beings has it ever worked. We just have these little fleeting moments in between physical conflicts where people can be trusted for long enough not to exploit. But give it a couple generations and TikTok, it happens, okay? That's why revolutions start. I told you, this is a speech about revolutions. So I'm wearing this shirt that says it's a peaceful revolution. Something that I don't know if people fully comprehend, I think they're starting to get it, is that the way that you create abstract power, remember I said that to create abstract power, just convince people that they need your permission to do stuff? Well, when we invented computers, we created a new form of abstract power. It's given nerdy names like administrative privileges. But anytime anyone creates or writes a piece of software, software is only a belief system. And I've got a whiteboard here, and we're going to get nerdy because I'm me. So, but before we jump into this, it's not going to be too nerdy, I promise. before we jump into this, I just want to make it very clear. Everything about software is a metaphor. The term software is a metaphor. Okay? People choose to use their imaginations to describe the complex emergent behavior of their computers. But software is strictly a metaphor. It does not physically exist. We'll get nerdy about that. But another point I want to make is in 1953, when Paul Nyquist invented that word, software, it was a neologism for, quote, absolute power over slavishly obedient machines. So software itself literally began as a neologism for abstract power, as a way to have full top-down command and control over people's slavishly obedient machines. And so when we created computers, when we created machine code, when we created software, we created a whole new way for Admiral Columbus to come in and exploit us through our common belief systems. And we are extremely vulnerable. And all hacks, all breaches, all cybercrime, if you took all the cybercrime and added it together, it would be the third largest economy in the world behind US and China alone. And it's expected to 10x in the next 5 years. So cybercrime is big business. And all of it is systemic exploitation of people's belief systems. And all of it is people thinking that they can magically come up with some type of perfect encoded logic that will prevent people from systemically exploiting logic. And it never works, and we see it everywhere. And so what I'm going to get into here is that if we've created a new form of abstract power, then we've also created a new form for humans to systemically exploit and oppress other people. And I think what we're seeing is this escalate to a point where people are starting to realize that there's only one way to get out of this state of systemic exploitation. And it's through the way it's always been. It's through the projection of physical power. It's through the ability to impose a severe prohibitive cost on the people who are exploiting you, oppressing you, attacking you. It is not through logic. It's not through writing more code. Code doesn't stop the systemic exploitation of code. What does is a lot of watts, okay? So, easy example. Somali pirates have captured Tom Hanks, or whatever his name was, on the ship, okay? We didn't reason or, try to apply logic to that situation. We imposed a severe physical cost. I think where people get confused is that people are assuming, because it's always been true, that the only way to impose physical cost is lethally or is in a way that can physically harm someone. But that's not true, okay? Because for the last 150 years and for the last 80 years especially, we've known that matter is swappable with energy. And if that's true, then that means you can create power two different ways. You can create it kinetically through force, displacing mass. That usually hurts people. But you can also do it electrically through charge passing across resistor. Why? Because matter is swappable with energy. You can use energy to impose severe physical costs on people. That's interesting. And by the way, we're already doing it. I used to be a subject matter expert in electronic warfare. Battles are fought and won all the time through the electromagnetic spectrum. We're doing this already. What we haven't figured out is how you do it through this new domain, this new belief system where people are being systemically exploited. Except we really have figured it out. And it's called Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so my job when I'm talking to the White House or the Office of the Secretary of Defense or the staffers for the Joint Chiefs is to help them realize that it is this nation's fiduciary responsibility to know when new power projection technologies emerge, to know when we're being systemically exploited through our belief system, and to empower people to physically defend themselves. to impose severe physical costs on the people who are oppressing them. That is the American value. That's how we became America. There is very little more American, especially here in Massachusetts, especially 20 miles away from Lexington and Concord, than people willing to project power to impose severe physical costs on the people who try to impede their rights. Their rights, in this case, to send bits of information across cyberspace. If you're going to exploit my ability to do that, if you're going to block my ability to do that, then you should expect a revolution. You should expect people to learn some way, through some clever roundabout way, to project power to impose severe physical costs. So then the question is, all right, well, how? How could you possibly do that in this cyber domain? And it's actually, from what I've been researching, it's actually like really simple. It's so simple that it's weird that it hasn't been talked about before. Maybe it has, but I just haven't seen it. And so that's where I'm going to get pretty nerdy. And so this is where I go to usually what I do at MIT when I'm talking to other nerds. And I think it's hilarious that I'm sitting here in a bar with a whiteboard. But it resonates. So what I'm going to show you is how revolutions can happen in, from, and through cyberspace. And what I think the big picture of Bitcoin is, because I don't think the big picture of Bitcoin is just money. I think that bits of information can represent any kind of information, including but not limited to money. And I think that people are starting to recognize that they are being exploited at population scale that would make past people, the pharaohs, everyone blush. We have people who have complete control over the slavishly obedient machines of billions of people. We have a population that is becoming increasingly more dependent on their machines. And behind every single one of our machines, including the one in my pocket right now, is someone pulling the strings, except for one program. And so let's get into it. So it's really simple. All it takes to understand what Bitcoin means and why the shitcoiners out there don't understand why it's such a big deal is to look at the basic tech stack of any normal computer. So we're going to step back 80 years. We're going to go to 1940, and we're going to go to all the people who were trying to come up with intelligent machines. They're trying to figure out how you could create a general purpose thinking machine that could solve just general ideas. And one of the top dudes at the time who was leading the way was this guy named John von Neumann. He's kind of underappreciated. Like people think, share all the love with like Turing and those guys. But John was pretty big deal. You just didn't hear about him a lot because he was behind the scenes working on the Manhattan Project most of the time. In fact, the first computer, the first operational general purpose computer, is about 30 minutes down the road. And when it was built and delivered by IBM to, at the time, Harvard, this guy, John von Neumann, shows up and is like, I got it. I'm going to run a couple programs first. And he was on this like mysterious project. No one knows what it is. But what he was doing was he was optimizing the design of the detonator for the Trinity Project, now known as Manhattan Project, or Trinity Bomb for what's now known as the Manhattan Project. And I think we're going to have a movie on that soon, which is going to be exciting. Okay, so here's how a computer works. Really simple. You got this thing. It's a machine. It has a physical state. I'll show you the most simple computer. I think I brought it. I think I remembered this time. I forgot last time. Right, there it is. Okay. This is the most simple computer that I could buy online. It's got one button. It's got one state. I press the button, and a light comes on. I take it off. Light goes off. Okay? So this is a state machine. It has a physical state. It has two physical states. Its state space, so the number of physical states that it can take, is 2. This one and that one. That's it. Okay? So by itself, it's not remarkable. But humans are very imaginative people. We can take just states, physical states, or we can take symbols, just random symbols, And just by how we structure what we're doing in physical reality, we can share abstract and semantically complex and syntactically complex meaning. This is special. I don't think there is any other animal right now alive that can do this. In fact, if we take a big picture look right now, it's actually kind of weird what's happening. Like if other animals saw what's happening in this room, they would be freaked out about how creepy we look. Because all I'm doing is I'm just modulating the waveform of my voice, just what would seem like randomly, but it's not random. And then all of y'all are just sitting still, and you're just staring at me. So if any animal saw this, you're like, what is going on, right? But just by modulating the physical amplitude of the waveforms that I can produce with my vocal cords, I am sitting here and I'm spitting knowledge into everyone's prefrontal cortex. This is something that humans do. This is something that makes us very special. We can do that because we have gigantic foreheads, and we figured out how to wield fire, and we figured out how to cook our food and other stuff like that, and then kill 90% of all the species on Earth. So the point is, we've got really good abstract thinking skills, and we use that to convey complex meaning through physical things. In this case, I'm modulating the sound waves out of my voice. In this case, I'm writing symbols. But I can also apply symbolic meaning to wherever that thing is that I have in my pocket. This thing, this machine, okay? And I can say that meaning is 1 or true, and I can say that means false or 0. And just by how I click it, similar to just how I modulate my voice or just how I scribble these words on the board, just by how I change the state of this machine, I can convey complex meaning. That meaning does not physically exist. I am just transferring abstract ideas from my prefrontal cortex into your prefrontal cortex. And so if I program this machine to have different states, to take different states, nothing really is physically happening besides the state changes on this machine. I'm just conveying information to you through this machine. There's a middleman here. And so when we invented computers, it was a step change revolution in how humans communicate to each other, because we figured out how to communicate through each other, not through writing on a board, but through speaking to each other through states of a state machine. That's what computer theory really represents. It's miraculous, the amount of symbolic meaning that we can apply to transistor states. It's pretty miraculous. And so those states have become more complex over time, those state machines. So this one's got a state space of 2, but now these days they're pretty powerful. Okay, so we've got a state machine. And remember how I said this state means 1, this state means 0? That's Boolean logic. People were starting to figure that out in the 1800s after Babbage and Ada Lovelace since then. We have a name for that. It's called machine code. And so just by modulating up and down, just binary states, I can convey complex meaning. Okay, we figured that out. And then on top of machine code, in the 60s or so now, so von Neumann figured out state machines. He figured out stored program state machines, so he can communicate the instructions to the machines through its own Boolean logic and store it on its own memory, which was a revolution at the time. We started noticing that the machine code that we apply to our computers, it's a huge pain in the ass. I don't know if you ever worked at the machine code level, but it's nuts. So people started noticing there's common assemblies of machine code that people use. And so they created this thing called assembly language, and I'll get out of the way real fast. Okay, this is in the 60s-ish. And then people started using assembly language, and they started instructing the state machine on what to do. Now, it should be noted that at no point did the act of computer programming become anything but commanding this thing to take a state through binary logic, through Boolean logic. We just abstracted. We used a simplification method to make it easier to give those instructions. And then by the 70s and the 80s, and especially into the 90s, we started getting general purpose languages. So we started abstracting even assembly language. We started noticing there's common assemblies of assembly language. and we started creating what's called general purpose languages. And that's the ones that we use today. So if you're a programmer today, you're walking on the shoulders of giants. You can walk in and you can learn the basic syntax of a modern general purpose language, and you can do a lot of damage. But what you're doing is taking advantage of all this work over 70 years of all these people that were able to build that for you. And now, and unfortunately, you can learn how to program a computer without knowing any computer theory or computer science. You can know nothing about what's happening under the hood when you're using your general purpose language. In fact, in the field of computer science, abstraction and information hiding, so simplifying as much as you possibly can, is considered a virtue. You have to do it if you want to be good at computer programming, because this is way too freaking complex for anyone to really grasp on their own. And so in the field of computer science, if you're learning how to program, you're paying attention almost only to this level. You almost never pay attention to assembly language anymore unless you're like a real like super duper computer scientist. And then you're probably not really paying attention much at the machine code level. Okay, so why did I go through all that? Because what happens, let's just say, well, let's actually summarize what we already talked about. Hacking, anytime anyone gets exploited through their belief system, that's happening because software itself is a form of abstract power. You have slavishly obedient control over this machine through the software you write. And if people depend on that machine, for example, for like their financial transactions, then you have slavishly obedient, or you have control over those people who depend on their slavishly obedient machines. And it's actually a nicer form of power because your machines, at least for now, don't rebel against you, or they don't rise up against you. So you can have a lot of control over a population through their machines. And so what's happening right now are people are trying to figure out how to protect themselves, how to protect what's on their state machine, so their data, your data, how to protect that data from leaking, how to protect themselves from being systemically exploited by encoding logical constraints. They think that there is some magical combination of logic that you can encode into this at any of these levels to protect you from people exploiting you down at this level. And it ain't working. I don't know if it hasn't been clear to people, but it's not working. In fact, the way that most people try to logically constrain their software now is to create a permission-based hierarchy. They create what I call another God kingdom or another abstract power hierarchy, and they give all the permissions for those sensitive control actions or those people that have like access to important data. They give it to like a couple special people with special permission and special rank. Those are your new digital age God kings. Those are the people wielding the abstract power. Okay, and you see it happening. You see Elon Musk buy Twitter, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, holy crap, this dude has the ability to change what we see. He has the ability to manipulate the information, and it is considered normal now. If you can believe it, it is considered normal now for practically any application that you download on your computer to take all the data that it harvests off your state machine and then sell it to people, and then commonly experiment on you through your machines. And they are doing this. They're openly doing this. They'll test out this news feed on this side. They'll test out this news feed on this side. They'll compare how they behave, and then they'll back out those causally inferable relationships. In other words, through your machines and through your data that you give them, they are figuring out how to control you. They can figure out how to cause. What are the causally inferable relationships that they can generate through what they present to you through your machines? Not just correlation, they know how to cause population scale behavior now. Okay? So in the digital age, we were talking about agrarian society and precious resources. In the digital age, in the 21st century, 22nd century, the most precious resource that you can have, maybe not the most, but definitely one of the big ones. Obviously, like oxygen and water is pretty important. But another important one is your data, your information, those bits of information that are right here. And everyone who can write this can get it. And they are, and they're manipulating you through it. So when you're waking up in the morning and you're about to head out to work, you're going to walk down Mass Ave to MIT for your class, and you get a little push notification that says, hey, you can get a smoothie for 50% off over the next 2 days. Okay? That's not serendipitous. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm about to walk by the smoothie restaurant. It's so weird. No, that's not serendipitous. They are tracking where you go, where you live, your routes. They're using predictive algorithms. They know that you're going to walk by that smoothie place with a 98% probability in 15 minutes. And they already sold that ad space to that smoothie company. And they do this everywhere. It's not just for your smoothies, it's for who you vote for, it's everything. Okay? If you want to learn more about this, read The Hype Machine or take Sinan Haral's class at MIT. This is scary stuff, and it's happening all the time. You know, you're being surveilled through TikTok. It's not even like a secret. And people just put up with it. Why? Because they don't have other means. They don't have any way. They just think it's something that they can't get away with. But that's not true. There is a way that you can resist against this. And we know what it is. This room is one of the few groups of people who know exactly how you can start to physically secure your bits of information against any form of systemic exploitation. Not just denial of service attacks, any form. Because if you empower yourself to impose physical costs in from through cyberspace, you have a way to resist this. And this is where we get to Bitcoin. So fast forward to 1991-ish. We know that cybercrime is a problem. We know that cybersecurity is a problem. A couple people started coming up with this idea that the military has known for thousands of years, which is, hey, if we want bad guys to stop doing bad things online, we should, instead of trying to encode logic, let's just impose severe physical costs on them. Or let's just make it too difficult. They literally don't have enough computing power or physical power to access the bits of information on my machine. It's an interesting idea. Okay, so the idea is an equation. It's called the benefit to cost ratio of attack. In order to secure yourself against attack, whether it be systemic exploitation, you can try to encode logic. It ain't going to work, I promise. Or you can just impose severe physical costs through this thing called the benefit to cost ratio. So it's a simple equation. I'll actually write it up so we can remember it. So if you want to keep yourself secure, physically secure, there's the secret of the military. There's a benefit to cost ratio of attack. There's a benefit to attacking you. Okay? And then there's a cost of attacking you. And this is set to the benefit to cost ratio of attack, right? So you have two options essentially. I'm going to write it over here so it doesn't get in the way. If you want to keep yourself secure, you can try to encode logic, or you can just focus on that. The benefit of attacking you already exists. You already store your data on the machine. You already have a big pile of gold. You already have access to this big plot of land that someone has envious eyes on. So the benefit of attack is always increasing the more prosperous you are, the more resources you have. Okay, so you can try to encode logic to try to protect you, or you can just project power, we'll say that, and increase the cost of attacking you. Okay, so how do you do that through cyberspace? We know how to do it through the other thoroughfares, right? We know if you want to decrease the benefit to cost ratio of attack through the sea, when the Somali pirates tries to deny you access to the sea, or tries to deny your ability to exchange goods across the sea, we know, the Navy SEALs know how to increase that cost of attack, okay? Ditto for land, ditto for air, and now we're learning how to do it in space too, so you can actually increase the cost of attacking you on orbit. And by the way, that's not a lethal competition because there's no humans in that loop, at least when it's in orbit, at least for now. Okay, so the point is, it doesn't even have to be lethal. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be kinetic either. You can do it all through energy. You just have to figure out how do you secure your state machine by decreasing your benefit to cost ratio of attack. And to do that, you focus here. You make it too physically expensive in watts to exploit you, to move a bit. Okay? So this is where things get interesting, because for the last 80 years, a bunch of computer scientists and a bunch of computer engineers have been operating under assumption that they haven't known they're making. Everyone has been assuming that if you want a better state machine, you should make it cheaper, faster, lighter. You should make it as simple to change states as possible. Every bit that you make out of your machine should be getting gradually cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to create. So you want, the assumption is cheaper bits are better. Okay? No one, for whatever reason, is trying to think of the opposite. So for example, the fastest computer right now can download the entire internet in less than 3 seconds. And the way you do that is because they changed the state mechanism. It's no longer transistor states. They use light itself. So they modulate the phase and amplitude and frequency of light. And by applying Boolean logic to that physical state change, and light itself is very fast, very cheap, and very light, you can make a really badass fast computer. That's assuming that you believe that cheap and light and energy, energy efficiency is a good thing. That's an unspoken assumption. People just blindly accept that cheap light energy and cheap light computing is good, and it's only good, and you should only endeavor to make it easier and easier to create bits. No one has really been thinking the opposite. What happens if you try to make bits as physically expensive as possible? What happens if you tried to make a computer that was as big, as heavy, as slow, and as energy intensive as possible? Right? Why would anyone want to do that? What's the value of doing that, of making bits expensive? The value is the value of all revolutions, the value that we've seen in every example where people escape from systemic oppression. If you make bits expensive, you can start to make the exploitation of your bits expensive. You can start to impose physical costs on people who are exploiting you here. And this isn't even a new concept. Back with von Neumann, back in the 1940s, he said there's 2 ways to constrain a computer. There's 2 main constraints of the computer. He says, the first constraint is the imagination of the programmer. So whatever logic he can think of, whatever design he can think of, that is constraint number 1 on the computer. But he also says that the physical limitations of the state machine is the second constraint. So there is a way that you can physically constrain a state machine. Okay? So if you want to design some system, some piece of software, and you want to protect yourself against administrators or people selling your data or people exploiting through you, you can try logical constraints or you can try physical constraints. Okay, what people are missing is a protocol through which they can apply physical constraints to computers. That's what has been missing in cyberspace for the last 80 years. There is no open source, globally scalable protocol through which people are converting watts to bits in order to create the most expensive and difficult to change state machine as possible. Okay? And so just for the sake of theory, let's just run through this in our head and you'll start to see the connection here. Where am I on time? Okay, I got 10 minutes. All right. If you wanted to create the biggest, slowest, most energy intensive computer possible with the most difficult to change states, so you make bits that are as expensive as possible. If you just imagine what that end state would be, that end state would be the planet. Okay? You would try to find a way to create a planetary scale computer. And you would try to look for a state changing device in this planet that is expensive to change states. right? That requires a lot of power to change states. So whereas you use light, the cheapest electromagnetic state changing device, to make the fastest computer, you would want the opposite of that. What's the slowest electromagnetic thing, or what's the most expensive electromagnetic thing that I can modulate? Okay? It turns out the infrastructure for that planetary scale computer is already in place. We call it our global electric power grid. So if you look at the Earth at night, go to NASA, look at the Earth at night, you'll notice that Earth looks a lot like a circuit board. Okay, you'll see all these lights lit up. You see all these little light-emitting diodes, and they're all connected to each other through these electrical wires. Earth, from up in space, looks like a circuit board. So what if we figured out a way to modulate the state of the global electric power grid in order to create our bits of information? And then what if we figured out some special device, I don't know what you would call it, but you create this converter. And going into this converter are watts, and coming out of this converter into our normal state machines that we use on the normal cyberspace, it converts it to bits, okay? So what we're missing, if we wanted to turn the planet itself into the largest computer ever built, into the most expensive to change states ever built, we would have to figure out how to convert the planet into a computer. And the circuit board and the motherboard is already in place. All that is missing is that converter. All that is missing is the operating system to run this badass planetary scale computer. And if you figured it out, that would be a big deal, because then you would be able to constrain this. This would be able to defeat the abstract power of this, and you would be using real power to do it. So you say, my state machine will not change its states unless you show me that. You show me bits that were created off of my planetary scale computer. By the way, the planet is globally decentralized, like our electronic power grid is globally decentralized. So if we all use this planetary computer, one, we would all be using the same computer, but two, we would all have decentralized control over this computer because the planet itself and the global power grid has decentralized control over it. So that's an interesting idea. We say that you can't do anything, or you can't change the state of my state machine unless you show me bit watts, unless you use this protocol that converts watts, not transistor states, watts. Large, massive quantities of watts that I've pulled out of the global electric power grid, as if I'm using the power grid itself as a computer. Let's use that, because that's something that they can't control. And that's what Bitcoin is. We just arbitrarily choose to call bit watts a coin. Bits can be anything. It can represent any kind of information. It doesn't have to just represent what we arbitrarily abstract as a coin. And so my thesis and my main theory that I've been briefing to the White House, etc., is that Bitcoin, and the reason why people don't get it, is because for 80 years, like I kept on saying, everyone's only paying attention to this. Computer scientists, everyone is only paying attention to this. They're ignoring everything that's happening under the hood. It's considered virtue in computer science to ignore and information hide everything, to use metaphors that are not technically accurate. Okay? So if, just hypothetically, but not really because it's happening, if we figured out a new way to disrupt how we do computing, to disrupt the internet architecture from the ground, from its very foundation, and we added a new piece of hardware to the bottom of the tech stack, not to the top. Not we changed software, but we figured out a way to change the underlying hardware. Would these people recognize it? If they've already adopted the habit for 80 years of ignoring everything that's happening at the bottom of the tech stack, and especially ignoring what's happening at the state mechanism level or under the state mechanism level, no, they wouldn't recognize it. They would have no idea. They would see this, never having seen it before, and they would knee-jerk reaction because they're ignoring all the assumptions that they're making, and they would just call this a waste of energy because they have no idea what's actually happening. They have no idea that people have figured out a completely new form of computing where they convert watts into bits instead of transistor states into bits. And those bits are reverse optimized to be expensive as possible. And the reason why we're doing it is because people have a right to physically defend their access to their bits. And you can do that one way, and that's by increasing the cost of attacking your bits or exploiting your bits. And if you want to increase the cost of attacking you, if you want to impose costs, if you want to project power in from through cyberspace, then you must convert power itself to bits. And that's the holy crap. Because if you think about it, I don't know if anyone familiar with the strangler pattern? I know I use terrible words. Like, I mean, they sound awful. Okay, this is an actual legit thing in computer science. Okay, this happened over the last 15 years, especially in the DoD. So I'm going to erase a little bit of this. Okay. All right, strangler pattern in software. It happens when you've got an old architecture and you need to update all your systems to a new architecture. And it's hard to do it because you've got your legacy system and you've got all your services and software on that stuff. We had this problem in the DoD. We still have this problem in the DoD where our DoD systems are old as hell. So when new lieutenants come in, I would take them to the Combined Air Space Operations Center and show them our equipment. And they would be horrified because they would sit down at a computer and there was like this rolly ball. And it's like, why is there a rolly ball? Is there, why? And it's like, oh, this computer was created before the mouse was invented. And we're still using it. Like, that's how old some of the hardware is in our systems, okay? Like, you should see the hardware that's in our nuclear ICBMs. It's funny. So anyways, old stuff. You have old hardware, you have your old infrastructure, you have your old state machine, and then you have your new stuff. Okay, here's the new hardware. Right now, the big thing is cloud native. Everyone wants to be cloud native. You gotta store your programs and your information not on your machine on premises, you gotta do it on the other machine. It's actually more cyber secure oftentimes to do that because you can containerize the stuff and all this other nerdy stuff. But the point is, if you're like a company or a military and you've got to figure out how to gradually move your software from the old to the new, you have to figure out how to do it that will disrupt operations the least. And the way that this is commonly done is called the strangler pattern. It's referring to the strangler fig or something like kudzu, where when kudzu comes into a forest, it kind of it's like a vine. It wraps itself up the trunk and spreads its leaves, and eventually you don't see the tree anymore, and eventually the tree's just a skeleton because it's all kudzu now. Okay, so how do you do something like that with an infrastructure? Okay, you've got all your old services. So here's all this other crap up here, all your software, your payment systems or whatever, all the stuff that we use in the military. You've got one by one, you've got to pick one piece of software, you've got to make it cloud native, and you just do this gradually. You run both systems in parallel, and one at a time, you port one service from the old to the new, one service from the old to the new. Okay, that's the strangler pattern. Okay, so what if there was an old version of the internet, an internet that's easy to systemically exploit, an internet through which people are being oppressed at unprecedented scales, an internet where people have no capability to impose physical costs on their attackers. They're forced to try to encode logic, they're lied to, and they're told that some special combination of voting system can protect us from abusing our state. What if there was a way, maybe something like this, a new tech stack. What if there was a new tech stack that actually empower people to physically defend themselves, to physically defend their bits of information, to stop people from denying their access to their bits of information, no matter how they want to use those bits of information. You want to call it your money, so be it. Okay, well you do the strangler pattern. You create the old internet, you create the new internet. And then gradually, one by one, you start migrating services from the old internet to the new internet. And what would be the first service that makes sense? The one that seeds the development of the new internet. So the first service is financial services. It just makes sense. Because if you port financial services first, you simultaneously fund the development of this new infrastructure, of all those special converters that convert the planetary scale mechanisms, electric power, into bits that allow us to constrain our state machines and thereby constrain the people who are trying to control us through our state machines. And so, in closing, what I believe Bitcoin represents is an internet revolution. It is a way that people, entire populations, the entire world, they're learning that they're being exploited. They're learning that there's no combination of logic that can protect them from systemic exploitation. And they're figuring out, and they're through with it, and they're figuring out, I can impose physical costs, I can project power against my oppressors by simply converting power into bits. I just need the infrastructure for it. And so what I think we're seeing is the whole world in a strangler pattern. The first service that's going to migrate off the old internet onto the new internet will be financial services, but it won't be just financial services in the future. I think we're going to see, we're already seeing it, right? As soon as someone started threatening to systemically exploit Twitter, what happened? People are porting to a Bitcoin version of Twitter. Like, it's already happening. It's happening right in front of us. We just need to recognize that this is so much more than just money. Money's just the first use case. But like, if you own Bitcoin, if you're buying Bitcoin, if you're part of this system, you could be, if the theory is true, building a new version of the internet. We are in an internet revolution right now. It's the people against their oppressors, their new versions of God Kings. And yeah, nation states are part of that, obviously. Like, we're openly denying other states access to the internet through SWIFT sanctions and stuff like that. But everyone's doing it. Like, you can't go anywhere on the internet where you're not being exploited by the people who control the programs. It's not just the programs controlled by nation states. It's not just state machines controlled by nation states or computer networks controlled by nation states. It's everything. And the reason why it's happening is because people don't have a way to physically defend themselves, except they do in this new version of the internet. So if you own Bitcoin, I think what you actually own are the bits of information that will make up this new version of internet. You own the bits of information that will be transferred and stored on this planetary scale computer that the whole world adopts. It is the foundation of the new form of the internet. It's going to be so much bigger than money, but we have to start to recognize why this is happening, why revolutions start, why no amount of logic can protect you from systemic exploitation, why, despite how much you like to talk shit about them, your power projectors, they're not all bad. There's ways to do it that don't involve hurting people, and by the way, you have to have it. Like I said before, it's not a matter of the only thing that really is in play here is how long are you willing to allow yourself to be exploited before you recognize that the only way out of this trap is through physical power. You don't have to do it kinetically. You don't have to hurt anyone in the process. It can be a peaceful revolution, and it's happening right now. And the core technology is Bitcoin. I guess the last thing I'll say is Bitcoin is a whole tech stack, it's a whole system. It's not just the software. In fact, the software is the least interesting part. The interesting part are these two bits, okay? Bitcoin is essentially the operating system of a planetary scale computer. And we're going to take that bad boy and we're going to plug it back into cyberspace, and it's going to transform the world, I think. At least that's what it looks like. So are there any questions?
Yeah, so I'm a Seinfeld fan, and you know when Kramer got up there in one show and he goes, "It blows your mind, Jerry. It blows your mind," right? Well, that's how I feel listening to Jason right here. I mean, I got about 20% of it. I hope other people got more. But this is what I say when I had an expression that I learned last night. They say, it's Matt Odell, and he says, "I'm bullish on Bitcoin but I'm more bullish on Bitcoiners, okay? And this is what brings together a group of people in this room with the talent of this young man, MIT and MacEng and all the stuff, but he has a vision for the future that I believe is gonna help out my kids. I just want to say that I'm blown away. I hope you guys feel the same thing. Jason's here to answer questions. If there's other questions that anyone in this room has, this is about learning. Open mind, not state controlled. It's about expanding your paradigm. So great job, Jason. As I said, look, I thought a year and a half ago you were the smartest kid I've met. Now I'm certain of it. So thanks again for having me and Jeff and Greg. Extremely well done. This is a local product. I mean, he's on his way to Cape Canaveral, unfortunately, but I'm so proud to call him a friend, and I know he's going to do great things for our future. So thanks again, Jason.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, so any questions? I'll start here. Yeah.
What I was going to say was when you talk about there being a God King and these cyclical revolutions, how do we avoid, and maybe if you've thought of it, what it would look like or what it would manifest like, being re-exploited if we successfully implement this revolution?
Yeah, so one of the complex emergent benefits, it always puts me in a pickle anytime I have to be the guy to explain why warfare is good. There are benefits, there are complex social benefits to warfare. The main one is decentralization of control over resources and the ability to physically constrain the spread of these exploitable belief systems. So if you looked at like the Earth, I was talking to about this over dinner, but like if you were like an astronaut and you're looking down at Earth, what you'll notice is like there's not like, it doesn't say like Russia carved into the side of the Earth, or it doesn't have like borders, and there's not like multicolors to show you that there's 195, like the Earth's land is partitioned 195 ways and you're not allowed to go past this river. Okay, that doesn't exist, that's in our heads. Those are belief systems. Nation states are not physically real things. We just believe that they exist. And the reason why there's 195 of those different belief systems, the reason why our dry land is partitioned across 195 different arbitrarily drawn lines or circles, is because for the last 10,000 years, humans have been projecting a lot of power to compete for control over those resources. And so I guess that is actually a feature, that's a safety feature. Because of that, no crazy person can control all the resources of the world. Anytime any crazy person has tried on any military campaign or abstract belief system campaign, or religious campaign, or whatever you want to call them, no one in the history of human agrarian society has been able to achieve not even 51% control over Earth's natural resources. And so the emergent benefit of warfare, of that physical competition, is decentralization. And because of decentralization, it effectively acts like a fire door. It's a safety feature, a fire door like in a building. So you'll notice like if you go to like a hotel, the doors automatically close, and if you like prop them open, people get pissed at you because it's a safety feature. If a fire breaks out, those doors serve as interlocks and they contain the fire. Well, borders kind of function as fire doors. So like if any crazy dictator takes over like a certain country, everyone else is safe, right? That fire is contained within that country, so long as you have strong borders, right? Which is where your military comes in, which is the physical power competition. So I think as long as this new version of the internet stays decentralized, then we should be able to very well resist or defend and secure ourselves against systemic exploitation. Systemic exploitation could still happen locally, but at least it wouldn't be happening on a global scale as it's happening now. And this is another like thing that's so controversial to say, but it makes sense if you understand the function of warfare, not what its form is, but its function. If you understand the function of warfare as something that creates decentralization of control authority over valuable resources as a complex emergent effect of this power competition, then what you realize is that when Satoshi Nakamoto was looking at Hal Finney's work and was looking at this like transferable proof of work thing, sequentially transferable proof of work, he's looking at Hal Finney's thing. The problem with it was managed by a central server. So of course we all know what does Satoshi do? All right, well let's take this protocol, let's put it on a network, so a decentralized network of nodes or of servers. And so what happens when you do that? You run into the Byzantine generals problem, the network computing problem. How do you achieve consensus on the legitimate state and chain of custody of the underlying resource? Or how do you decentralize that underlying resource? And so what does Satoshi do? He creates a power competition, a global scale power competition, a way for everyone to access power and to compete for control authority over this underlying resource and to determine and achieve consensus on the legitimate state and chain of custody of this underlying resource. So the reason why people just around the world universally agree that this is the United States, that this plot of land right here belongs to this place called the United States, is because there are people, my compatriots or others, and many others over hundreds of years, who are willing to engage in a global scale physical power competition to ensure that this is the United States. And everyone does this across the whole world. It's a small subset, less than 2% of the population are engaging in this global scale power competition, but as a result of that global scale power competition, decentralization of control over the Earth's most precious resource. You can do that electrically. You can do that through cyberspace. You just need the protocol to empower people to compete in that power competition, and then you just need the people to agree on the same protocol, like they all already do for TCP/IP or HTTP or all the other common protocols that we use on the internet. So that is why I call Bitcoin soft war, a soft war protocol, because it is functionally for many of the intents and purposes of warfare, and the complex emergent benefits of warfare, which is decentralization of control authority over precious resources, it is functionally equivalent. What was missing was a way to fight wars in, from, through cyberspace, a protocol to do it. And now we have it. And so like, for the same reason that no like dictator has been able to take over the world, I think no dictator will be able to 51% attack, at least sustain a 51% attack on this planetary scale computer. And I think that's how we'll be safe. We're physically securing ourselves. Any next one? Yeah.
Yeah, I assume you've explained this to your connections in government and to people in power. Like, what's their reaction to that? How do they receive this information?
The planetary scale computer one?
Like, are they just ignoring it?
No. The most, so like, you know, I've been talking to government people about this for years. Yeah. So I guess what I'll say is, right now, the biggest question is, why not just proof of stake? Why not just proof of stake? Yeah. You'll be, no, I don't want to say. I do not have a problem with standing up to far higher ranking people and answering that question. And so, but everything else, like these ideas that people, you know, at least in what I've seen, that these people like hate Bitcoin or want it, you know, they think it's going to usurp blah, blah, blah. I don't really see that. Most people kind of understand, and especially in the military, the DoD, like a lot of my friends, and I get almost nothing but support. I'll put it that way.
So when you're sharing your thesis and everything you kind of told us amongst these people, they're actually receiving it well.
Yeah, they receive it well because I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about a new version of the internet. I'm talking about a new way of projecting power in, from, through a new domain. And the people I speak to, they understand why that's important. I speak in their language. I'm saying, do you want to be powerful? Do you want to be in a good position in the future? Then listen to me, because this is what's happening right now. And it just happens that the first use case is money, but I won't be the only one. And so it's so funny. Like once you stop talking about it as money, all of a sudden all these political opinions, all these vested interests, they just evaporate. And then at the same time, you can just pretty much, you can make it clear that the last people qualified to be talking about this is the Department of Treasury. The last people qualified to be leading this discussion on the National Security Council are the banks.
What is the first use case and it's going to evolve past money? So if money is the first use case and it's going to evolve past money, do you still see it as money in your mind, or how do you see that?
So the first principles way of looking at it is we're creating a system that makes people able to secure their bits of information. I'm creating a new computer network where you can't deny me access to my bits of information. You can't deny my ability to transfer goods from one side of the internet to the other because you are literally not powerful enough to do it. Okay? So just ask yourself. We've already adopted the habit of using bits of information to denominate our wealth. That's been the case for decades. Okay? Just ask yourself, like, if you wanted bits of information to denominate your personal wealth, which network and which architecture would you use? Would you use the one where it's literally too physically expensive to deny your access to this network, to deny people's ability to transfer bits of information across? Or would you use the existing ones where they all the time block transactions, or where they all the time systemically exploit the system to undermine its purchasing power and blah, 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 blah. So like, in my case, I made that decision years ago. I was like, yeah, that sounds like a perfect way. I want those bits of information. I want those bits to be my money. But what's interesting is that, like I keep on saying, like everything that we do, everything that we value, our speech, our tweets, those are bits of information. Everything that is pulling off of our phone, those are bits of information. What we're missing is just a couple simple protocols, open source protocols on the Lightning Network to get people to start using this as something in addition to money. So not just using Satoshis as a way to transfer value, like monetary value, but a way to restrict computers. So you see everything that Michael Saylor is talking about. You see all these other applications that are going to start bubbling up through the Lightning Network. What's missing is just a couple simple protocols, and you've got them, the MicroStrategies, and you've got all these other companies that are starting to work on those. And once that happens, and by the way, you're already seeing it. Like, we're already transferring to Nostr because we recognize that that is a more secure way to keep our bits of information secure, and those bits of information happen to be our opinions that we tweet. So, at least for me, I'm not like, I think that's going to be a really good money. And I'm not saying that like it's not money. I'm just saying it's not only money. In fact, technically speaking, it's not Bitcoin, it's bit power. You're literally converting quantities of power to bits. And bit power is a lot more valuable. Hopefully you guys can understand. Bit power is a lot more valuable than Bitcoin. We've been projecting power and engaging in power competitions and using physical power for 4 billion years to establish our dominance hierarchies. And humans have been doing it for 300,000 years. And for our entire agrarian societies, just for agrarian civilization alone, we've been engaging in power competitions for twice as long as we've had money, or had laws, or even had written language. So bit power, the ability to convert power to bits, is way more valuable than just using those bits as money. And we're in a dangerous situation because if I'm right, let's just assume I'm right. I have no idea. I'll throw this thesis out and I'll let other people decide. If I'm right, then we're in a national strategic hazard because there are obvious vested financial interests at play here who wouldn't want this kind of system right? And if those are the people calling the shots, if those are the ones that are shoehorning this technology as cryptocurrency or blockchain, they're just flat out just marginalizing it because they're concerned about losing that. We're going to lose the whole stack just because these people don't want to lose this one service. And that's the risk that we're in. If this is the future version of the internet and like everything that we do, or at least everything that we want to keep secure in like a way that no other infrastructure can, then we can't allow the people that are just afraid of their one service of financial, halt it. Like, you don't have the option of stopping this. You don't have the option of stopping other people from adopting a planetary scale computer. It's a freaking planetary scale computer. Right? You only have the option of participating in it or not. And if they create this as the internet, they choose this as the internet, it doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what we want. This is not a negotiation. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Thanks. First, thanks for your service to the country. Appreciate that. Fascinating discussion. What I'm having a hard time with is the United States has the most money in the world. So clearly, for them, it's imperative that they control that stack. Because to me, Bitcoin is a huge disruptor, listening to what you have to say, and that disruptor levels out the playing field across all currencies across the world. And if all currencies across the world are leveled out, the biggest loser is the United States. So when you're talking to the White House, they want to know what they can do to prevent that from happening. Because, you lose the standard on the dollar, we can't print money like crazy, we lose.
Yeah, so in the field of safety engineering, I used to be the director of operations for the 2nd Space Launch Squadron in the Space Force. So our job is essentially to make sure the rocket doesn't blow up on the pad. So we're concerned about safety, we're concerned about making sure the rocket doesn't blow up. So one of the biggest systemic safety risks is a record of success at safety. So if you continue to be good at safety, you become cocky, you develop a hubris, you become complacent, and then the shuttle blows up, or something happens, some catastrophe happens. So one of the biggest systemic safety hazards is success. Okay, now translate that into security. Security is the exact same thing. Safety and security are basically the same thing. Okay, it is possible, and it has happened many times over the past at least 6,000 years of recorded history, for nations, the biggest security risk is success at being the top, at being the most powerful, okay? Because you develop some complacency, you develop some hubris. And then another problem is, for whatever reason, I don't understand why, people keep on making the mistake of believing that the next physical conflict, that next war, is going to look like the last war. And you study any new emerging power projection technology that's arrived. There's like anthropologists that devote their entire careers to this. You study these new power projection technologies, military technologies that emerge, things from rope to war horses to Whitehead torpedoes to mixes of charcoal and saltpeter that we now call gunpowder, but for 200 years people thought it was medicine. Or you look at all this stuff, airplanes, nuclear weapons, satellite communications, like literally every example of any critically new power projection technology that has emerged, people just discount it. They just don't respect it. They're always expecting the next war to look like the last war. There's no way, one of the famous quotes from Admiral Foch, the chief Supreme Allied Commander of World War I, quote, "Airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value whatsoever." Albert Einstein, 1933. There's no reason to believe that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. Chief military advisor to what's his face, a week before the Trinity detonation, so the first atomic detonation. Chief military advisor, like the guy in charge of the Navy, the direct advisor to the POTUS. Quote, "The Manhattan Project is the biggest fool thing we've ever done. The bomb will never go off, and I speak as an expert in explosives." The point is, people keep on thinking that the next war is going to look like the last war. They're going to think that the next warfighting technologies are going to look like the last one. They keep on forgetting that empires rise and fall all the time and have always done so by their ability to recognize those new power projection technologies and position themselves as the top. Okay? So, now let's step back. Let's say, just hypothetically, please don't send me a bunch of mean tweets over this. Let's say Satoshi Nakamoto did indeed discover software. He didn't just solve a network computing problem, he solved a cybersecurity problem that the entire internet faces. He figured out a way for human beings to compete in physical competitions non-kinetically. So he actually, this isn't just something for the internet, this is for society itself. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could compete over and decentralize control over our resources and our policies in a non-lethal way? Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet. So let's say Satoshi did invent software. If we have a history of 6,000 years of recorded testimony, essentially, of people always making the mistake over and over again of thinking that the next war is going to look like the last war, and then being surprised when, holy crap, the Japanese are bombing our naval fleet 8 years after we dishonorably discharged Billy Mitchell for saying that we shouldn't be pumping all of our money into battleships. Sorry, I'm an Air Force person, so I'm trained to hate. Sorry.
Me too.
So,
and I understand what you're saying.
but there's a point here. If software were created, would people recognize it as software? No, there's no reason to believe that they would ever recognize that we just created a new power projection technology that could disrupt agrarian society from its foundation. If we can't recognize what software is, because we've never seen anything like it before, that means it could start before anyone realizes this revolutionary war has started. And that also means it could be won before anyone realizes it. And so, if that's true, then it doesn't matter what the United States wants. It doesn't matter, that's how power works. It's unsympathetic to our desires. Yeah, maybe it's not going to be great for us in the position of the future. This is how the world works. If it's true, then it's it ain't a negotiation. It doesn't matter what we think. The best thing we can do is at least recognize that it's a possibility, and if it's true, and I don't know if it's true, I have no idea, but then the only thing left would not be to deny it or to ignore it. The only thing left to do, if a software revolutionary war has started, if it's maybe even already won, let's assume in this case it could have already been won, then the only thing left to do is negotiate the terms of surrender.
No, look, what you're saying is very powerful. I don't disagree with you. I think that there's a real vulnerability. I also am a patriot, and if there's 195 countries, 194 are going for number one.
Yeah.
And we don't know what it looks like if one of those 194 displaces number one.
Yeah.
And that's part of disruption, right?
Yeah.
And
That's-
you don't know who that
Yeah.
process is. So when you're talking to the White House or the DOD, it's I think they're trying to protect that whole premise.
There is so much hubris in that, just the fact that we think that we have that option. Just the fact that we think that we have the option to be number one or continue to be number one, or that there's any amount of choices that we can make to protect ourselves in the paradigm of the future after having openly discredited this technology for so long is so incredibly baked in with hubris and complacency. It's possible to be so dominant and so successful that you actually do not know, you cannot comprehend when you've lost. And so we gotta be careful about that. Maybe it might be true in the future that we're not number one in this new paradigm, but it's not like we have that decision. It's our responsibility to recognize it and at least place ourselves in the best possible position as possible. And if that means that we have to swallow our pride or acknowledge that we screwed up, then it doesn't matter what people want. I could do one more, but we're getting late, so.
This guy here.
Okay, cool.
Give him the mic. Give him the mic.
Thank you for letting me ask a question. I appreciate the meetup. It's actually a great place to see all the faces that are involved in the same vision. I wanted to go off of the previous two questions. With the previous concern, I'm assuming that the decentralized aspect is a major concern for government officials. Does the Lightning Network come up as a topic of discussion to mediate those grounds in cyberspace?
So far, no. We haven't even made it to that level yet. So far, the battleground is explaining to people why proof of work. So, like, the reason why you hear me like just constantly saying I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, I'm a proof of work maxi, or the reason why you hear me like constantly trash talking POS all the time is because that's the battleground right now. The ESG argument is the attack vector. Crypto. So here's how the attack vector works. You create an arbitrary category called blockchain, called cryptocurrency. Then you position yourself and masquerade as an expert in cryptocurrency. And then you label Bitcoin as a subset of that. And so by virtue of your masquerading as experts in cryptocurrency, you are tacitly claiming expertise over Bitcoin so that you're somehow qualified to say that it's a waste of energy, that blah, 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 there's a way to do this better. And so that is the main attack vector right now, is the people shoehorning this technology as this arbitrary term called blockchain or this arbitrary term called cryptocurrency, masquerading as experts in cryptocurrency because they're supposedly experts in monetary theory and economic theory. So we're qualified to be talking about this. And then using their misperceived expertise to discredit this technology as inefficient or bad for the environment. So they're finding any way that they possibly can to convince people through their ideologies, through their belief systems. They're trying to exploit people through their beliefs that more power is bad for the environment or that we're killing the environment, boiling the oceans. That's the attack vector. The attack vector is not what Twitter thinks, which is, we're afraid that it's going to take over the, like usurp the power of the United States and blah, 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 blah. It's not like, me trying to, whatever the conspiracy theories are. The attack vector is in the open right now. You can't talk to anyone. I can't go to anywhere in MIT. I can't talk to anyone at any part of the government that isn't already thinking that proof of work is bad for the environment. That's the attack vector. They're greasing the skids, using your belief systems, using your ideologies to grease the skids for banning this out of the country or trying to say that their CBDC or some other cryptocurrency is better. So that's the battleground. And I am in the thick of that right now. We're not even close to Lightning.
Not even there yet.
Yeah.
That's my concern, is the centralization scare. I'm sure that's what government will towards eventually, but we're not even there.
Yeah, my answer to that is just, if anyone gets concerned about over-centralization through higher layers, just return back to the base layer. That base layer is always there. Revert back, rebuild, or do whatever you need. Okay, I really had to stop this.
One more.
Yeah.
What would be your best case scenario for like the next move coming up for somebody, like in your mind, what do you think is the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, and how can people like us do anything?
The worst case scenario is we continue to allow monetary theorists, economic theorists, financial theorists, and Department of Treasury, Federal Reserve, banks masquerade as the experts in this technology. They use that expertise to shape public policy to their own benefit, to the detriment of the people who have the right to defend their bits of information. They kick this technology out of the country, but then everyone else adopts it for obvious reasons. And then we basically just point our gun at our foot and shoot ourselves in the foot. That's the worst case. And so, it's like already starting. We're already starting to see countries like what El Salvador is doing. So it sets so many important precedents. we're going to look back at that as a big deal. Russia's about to do it, I think. And like I was warning Senator Warren about this in February of 2022. Like I had that whole thread, like everything, like exactly down, like this is what's going to happen. Get me in front of whoever I need to talk to warn them about this. And so that's the worst case. Best case scenario, what I've been recommending to anyone that is willing to put up with me is that two things. One, domestic caching infrastructure. Be supportive of that. Get us like whatever we can do to encourage domestic caching, right? We need to do. That reminds me of a point that I need to make. So I'll make that right afterwards. The second one is stockpile Bitcoin, because holy crap, it's going to be strategically valuable in the future. And those are the two recommendations. Buy as much Bitcoin as you can, government, and be as supportive to a domestic caching infrastructure as possible. Get as much Bitcoin into American hands as possible. Maybe we're not going to be number one. Maybe it's too late for that, but like we can at least continue, like we can at least try to position ourselves as best as we can. One point that I want to make, I totally forgot to say this, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'll just say that this is what flipped a big person who didn't like proof of work. An energy person. Where's my civil engineer? I was talking to him earlier. There he is. Okay, civil engineer will like this. All right. Okay, so there's have you ever heard of Moore's Law? Okay, what's Moore's Law? Basically, you know how I was talking about everyone believes that faster computing is better, and as a result of everyone obsessing over trying to make their microchips as more efficient, energy efficient as possible, you get Moore's Law, which is every 2 years or something, the computing power of our computer chips doubles, essentially. I think it's like tapering off a little bit, but the point is, nerds really like making fast circuit boards and making them better. That's like what humans do really well, is just make really good, fast, cheap computers. And so there's a really surprising complex emergent benefit, a counterintuitive benefit, of creating a planetary scale computer. Okay, what happens if you use the planet itself, if you use the global electric power grid as your circuit board? What happens is you unlock Moore's Law for the power grid. All the nerds are going to try to figure out how to optimize their section of the power grid, okay, to be faster and more efficient. And they're never going to achieve it, right? Because the way that the protocol is developed is it's a fleeting horizon. You know, the difficulty's always going to get harder and harder ad infinitum. So there's no amount of efficiency that these people, you can't make your global power infrastructure efficient, enough to solve this, right? But just the act of all these people trying to optimize their circuit board, their motherboard that is the global electric power grid, what you actually do is you unlock Moore's Law for our power grid. And so this is the big thing here, is that if you turn the planet into a computer, you unlock all the benefits that we've already seen through the optimization of computers, but for our own civilian infrastructure. And because it's people changing the states of this, it's people contributing the energy, changing the watts. And because the planet itself and civilian infrastructure serves as the state-changing mechanism of this underlying computer, then what Bitcoin theoretically does, and it's totally valid through the laws of computer theory, that we are not programmed, we're actually programming human civilization. Because you have a program running on a state machine that is made out of civilian infrastructure. And so that's that, by the way, we already see it. We already see people optimizing the power grid. We already see real material changes. And so if you're talking to someone of high rank in the government who happens to be really interested in energy, hypothetically, you tell them that, and they will go in a 30-minute conversation from proof of work is bad for the environment to, is it too late to make our own proof of work network? So that's how you flip them. And that's one of the ways that's worked. But it just depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a military person, it's going to be different than I'm talking to someone else.
So why wouldn't they create their own?
My answer is I think it's too late. It doesn't matter what we adopt, it matters what the world adopts. So it's like saying, why don't we create our own new TCP/IP? Like we can create our own new protocol for the internet. You know, we can create a new transport control protocol. Ain't no one gonna use it. And by the way, let's be real. Why would we trust that the government with that? So yeah.
Thank you, Jason. Hey, great job. Great job. Thank you very much. And here's a book, Honking for Freedom, from BJ to you. All right. Hey, thanks for coming. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you got some value out of it. Value for value, baby. Jason, thank you so much. Keep doing your thing. Greg, thanks for the support. BJ, thanks for being here. Everybody, thanks for coming. Let's do it again.